Also, Sal, pronouns she, her in Ohio, wondering what the Bible has to say about abortion. So welcome to the show, Sal.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. It's a pleasure speaking to you. Yeah, I'm a long-time viewer, first-time caller, so exciting. Yay. So anyway, I've watched a good amount of your shows and whatnot, and so I know obviously Matt and I guess you too, Kirk, having been, former Christians in your adult life and studied the Bible a lot. I mean, former pastor and all that. I'm not super read up on the Bible because even though I was raised in a Christian family, became atheist as a teenager, and so never really read much of the Bible. But I am familiar with the section Numbers, chapter 5, 11 through 31, that is about the test for an unfaithful wife to go before a priest and potentially have a forced miscarriage for being unfaithful. And,
right.
That's when I learned about that, that was pretty striking. But I get to wonder a lot of the time, why is there such a strong connection between Christianity and being anti-abortion and pro-life or whatever you want to call it. But I know, from world history, from what I've learned, that apparently, ancient Rome, abortion was fairly common, and in a lot of other societies it was. And I know that part of how Christianity grew is they were pretty much anti-abortion in practice from the beginning, right? But I'm just wondering to ask both of your opinions. I just wanted to know if either of you guys know of anything else that it says in the Bible and about abortion, whether it's for or against.
Yeah. So first of all, it's relatively modern, like within my lifetime, that fundamentalist evangelical Christianity is so closely and strongly tied to abortion, to the sense that it becomes like a single issue thing for people to vote on. The Bible is pretty much silent about abortion. You talk about the ordeal of the bitter water, which is in Numbers 5, which is if you suspect that your wife has committed adultery, you make her drink this concoction, and if she is, then and there's a child, basically it forces a miscarriage. That suggests that the Bible isn't and God isn't necessarily opposed to abortion. There's also the notion that many times in the Bible, it's like in Exodus 21, if men are fighting and they hurt a woman who's pregnant and she miscarries, they shall be punished, but it's not death. It is something different. It is not an eye for an eye. So they basically pay a fine. And if later on, if the woman dies from this, then they were to die. So if they're fighting and a woman gets in the way and the woman dies, then they die. That's life for life. But if only the fetus dies, then it's not. Infants weren't counted in censuses until they were a month old. There's the closest thing they can get is that in Jeremiah 1:5 is that passage that's before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, which is God's essentially saying, this is where they get to life begins at conception or possibly four, and there is a soul in the womb. This is one of the primary verses that they'll use for that. But the thing is, it's not clear. And it's the reason why Judaism has a different take on abortion in most respects than fundamentalist Christianity. And I don't think that Christianity's growth had anything to do with being opposed to abortion. I think that was something that was kind of glommed on. It's something that makes sense and is consistent. I'm not going to say that Christians are, don't have a leg to stand on with regard to their Bible and abortion. It's just that the Bible's much more clear about whether or not you should eat shrimp. The Bible's much more clear about whether or not you should wear mixed fabrics. than it is about hell, than it is about abortion, than it is about cloning. There's nothing in there about cloning, and we're heading towards that. But at the end of the day,
right.
Go ahead, Curt.
Yeah, those were big issues for me in trying to work through all this, because again, this whole working from my what did I really believe and why, and to look at some really major things like abortion and like slavery. And Matt and I have talked about slavery several times. I've heard Matt speak about it in public, and I just thought, here is a God that I've worshipped that is supposedly all knowing and all powerful. And if he's perfect, that means everything he does isn't just one of an outcome that he could choose to do. It would have to be the absolute best. If he's perfect, everything he does is perfect. And so the Bible, to be perfect, means that there couldn't be anything that was left out of the Bible to make it better. And to me, if abortion was as big a deal to God as the American political system makes it out to be for the church, he could have mentioned it specifically in the Bible. If slavery was wrong, he could have mentioned that in the Bible. If rape was wrong, he could have mentioned that in the Bible. And if he didn't, then that means it was perfect not to. And that was a big issue for me. I don't think it'd be difficult to say, hey, the whole covet thing isn't as big a deal as don't rape somebody. And I couldn't rectify that. In that doesn't fit with the God having the attributes I was taught that he had. And abortion fell right in there with those other issues for me. Not that didn't sway me in being pro-choice or pro-life, but it was definitely an issue that I saw as far as religious or am I believing something that maybe isn't true?
Yeah.
Does that help, Sal?
I was just kind of wondering too, like as a kind of second part of that question is like, I'm for life, but I, can understand the emotional charge that this issue has, and basically the from the side of people who are pro-life, just kind of thinking in terms of equating the fetus as like a baby or child, that is like more, I would say on the same consciousness level as like what we think of as our fellow humans and whatnot. And I can understand the vegetation and all that, but I guess like for me, the things that persuade me, I tend to think of is like real world consequences, of what a policy has on society. And when I think about it that way, it's kind of just like kind of a no-brainer in a way in terms of the modern world. But sure. I guess what I'm sort of wanting to ask is I just have vague memories of when I was like a kid or younger teenager being, I guess, considering myself a Christian and kind of just sharing and accepting the beliefs that I heard around me. And, but I don't really, I guess that's all I can say in terms of trying to understand their thinking about it. And I mean, I've been around a lot of pro-life people and heard just about every argument they have about it. I've even it's a long story, but I've pretty much seen like the whole. I've heard it all from how their perspective is, and I guess what I'm wanting to ask is just like, as former Christians yourselves, what do you think the best way of arguing or persuading, people to see the other side of things? Because, like Matt, I've heard you do the like bodily autonomy argument, and I definitely think that's a strong argument. But I think the problem with that is that it doesn't, like, a lot of people don't really talk about or consider much of the bodily impacts of having a child. It's something that is kind of almost taboo, is everything about pregnancy and childbirth and breastfeeding is not very, people don't talk about it really until after you've had the kids. So, but aside from that, I'm just wondering, because I think a lot of people, when they hear the bodily autonomy argument, they might just dismiss it very quickly because they just think, oh, well, women have kids all the time and they're fine, and, what's the big deal or whatever, and in their mind, they're considering, a slight inconvenience with a life. And I guess what are your thoughts on, like, other arguments that that might have more sway? Because I guess for me, it's more, maybe it's a matter of going into the details of what that actually looks like in somebody's life.
So it's really complicated because, first of all, you were asking about the Bible, and the truth is most of the people that you're arguing with don't have a clue what the Bible has to say about this. They don't know how empty it is. They just think, thou shalt not kill, and you're killing, and that's the end of it. First of all, nothing in the Bible is relevant. Nothing in their religion is relevant because our laws are not in any way beholden to anybody's religion. So if their primary reason for wanting to make it illegal is that they're convinced their God doesn't want abortion to be legal, tough shit. Because our laws have to be based on secular things. So if they're not going to come with secular arguments, they've already ruled themselves out of any discussion on the legal. If they want to talk about whether or not it's moral, I don't really care what their opinion is on whether or not abortion is moral. I only care about whether or not it should be legal. They can think it's immoral all day long as they're not setting up a reason to outlaw it. So whatever reason they have to want to outlaw it must be secular. And if they don't come with that, then there's no other response needed. But what you're talking about is a little different because now you're talking about trying to persuade people to agree with what your position is. And you're going to find people in two different camps. One where they're going to be abortion is always wrong, no matter what, nothing. Rape, incest, no exceptions. Those people have an internally consistent position. It's consistently wrong. And I don't know that you're likely to change their mind. You can definitely, go emotional appeals. If you can get them to recognize that they should have an exception for like the 11-year-old, 12-year-old rape victim that becomes pregnant, if you can get them to accept that exception, now all of a sudden what they're arguing is that abortion is sometimes moral and sometimes not moral. And now their position is weaker and on shaky footing. And getting them to recognize that if there's something about that, and the only thing that has changed is their opinion about the individual who happens to be pregnant, why don't they care about the other people who don't want to be pregnant? Why is it that they think they can force other people to be pregnant against their will? And the answers that you often get are this, well, if women want to have sex, then they should take responsibility for the pregnancy that ensues. Yes. And men should stop impregnating women is the response, as long as we're staying cis-normative. It's a difficult thing, and you have to do it like person by person to figure out what they truly care about. And you may not be able to change their position. I know atheists who are absolutely pro-choice who think that abortion is still immoral, no matter how many times I say, well, what about this situation? What about this? I can come up with 50 different examples where they say, oh, the most moral thing you can do is not carry that child to term. And yet they'll still say, but abortion is immoral. There's some sort of deep emotional thing here that's going to be difficult to counter. You've got to go person by person. And the important thing is, rather than getting mired in discussions about whether or not it's moral or not, because we don't legislate morality, it is immoral for you to cheat on your partner, but there's almost no place where it's illegal. And in the handful of places where it's still illegal, it's never really prosecuted, because we realize that we don't have the right to do that. So it's a lot of work. Well, and the big thing to remember is that they have to come up with a secular argument, or they've ruled themselves out of the discussion about the law.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I hear what you're saying there. I guess the thing that that comes to my mind though is that a lot of these people, whether they really think so or not, out loud at least, they pretty much equate abortion to murder. And you say we don't legislate morality, but in a way we do. It's to the extent that everybody agrees what is moral or not. I guess.
No. It doesn't require everybody to agree. And even if everybody did agree, that we don't legislate something just because it's immoral. People are allowed to be immoral. Everyone would agree that it would be immoral for me to walk up to a 5-year-old and yell at them and call them names and belittle them. But it's not illegal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a jackass and I'd be an asshole for doing it. Yeah. So, yeah, they've got to come with a secular argument.
Yeah, I guess, but my big thing is, like, for people, I think that a lot of people who might claim that they think that they're equating abortion to murder is like, okay, if you really be honest with yourself, I don't see how you could, like, almost everybody knows somebody who's had an abortion, or, even if they don't know it, more than likely there's probably somebody in your immediate circle who has had an abortion. And I really don't think that if you want to follow through on that, that would be
murder.
Yeah.
Murder has a specific legal definition. Murder is the wrongful killing. In order for abortion to be murder, that is a legal distinction, not a moral distinction. Killing isn't necessarily moral or immoral. It is under certain circumstances. Like, for example, if somebody comes at me, breaks into my house, and they wind up dead as a result of self-defense, defense of others, that is a killing. That is not murder. And so murder is only a legal distinction. So once again, if they're going to say abortion is murder, they are factually wrong until abortion is listed as murder. And even most of them aren't necessarily trying to get abortion listed as murder. But there's no easy solution. And I apologize, Sal, but I got to move on to some other callers. If they don't come with a secular argument, you're kind of stuck. And for the rest of it, each individual person is going to be different. You got to find the thing that appeals to them. Just don't try to convince people with fallacies and lies. But
all right. Well, I appreciate you taking my call. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Have a good night.